welcome today to the third edition of the Africa Talk series with the American Society of International Law, the Africa Interest Group. The American Society of International Law was founded in 1906 to foster the study of international law and promote the establishment of international relations on the basis of law and justice. Within the American Society of International Law, you have various interest groups. Among them is the African Interest Group. The African Interest Group is one of the interest groups of the American Society of International Law, which is committed. The African Interest Group is committed to examining, elevating conversations, and organizing events that foster dialogue on contemporary legal and socio-political issues that directly impact the character and well-being of African states, African people on the continent and in the diaspora. Today, the webinar will be co-hosted with the New Jersey City University, the Institute of Dispute Resolution. The webinar is in partnership with the Institute of Dispute Resolution, an institute that promotes negotiations and mediation techniques to manage disputes in cross-border commercial and general conflict resolution forums. The New Jersey City University is one of the 3 biggest private universities in the United States of America, and we're pleased to have her partner with us today. The topic for today is diversity in the legal profession. What is diversity? Diversity means recognizing our individual differences. This could be based on race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, social economic status, age, physical abilities, religious beliefs, political beliefs, and other ideologies. Diversity in the legal profession is important because it promotes public perception of equality and a fair judicial system. It is all important because it gives a strong and diverse and effective legal profession to the world out there. Why is diversity important? Diversity matters because it is critical to the legitimacy of our judicial system and the rule of law. In 2020, the Law Society of England and Wales reportedly stated that diversity within its region comes within these ratios. Women account for 49%, BAME, which is the Black, Asian, and minority ethnic group, account for 21%, and disabled account for 3%. This ratio is yet to be determined whether it's okay or not. The diversity in law is connected to various issues. Amongst them is the historical perspective of the New York Convention of 1958 down to the 2018 Singapore Convention on Mediation. So diversity is quite a big and broad area. Today, we're going to look at different aspects of diversity. Our keynote speaker is Mrs. Nwabueze Nwokolo, a well-recognized and reputable solicitor of England and Wales. She's a Commonwealth lawyer qualified in Nigeria and England and Wales. She is a mediator as well as a conflict resolution advocate. Nwabueze Nwokolo is the chair of the Black Solicitors Network Midlands, United Kingdom, a member of the Ethnic Minority Lawyers Division at the Law Society of England and Wales. She's also a council member of the Law Society of England and Wales. Today, her topic is equality, diversity, and inclusion in England and Wales Commonwealth jurisdiction. Thank you. Mrs. Nwabueze Nwokolo, please.
Thank you very much, Ijeoma, for that introduction. Thank you also for our hosts, and thank you to my colleagues here on the panel and everyone else who has joined us for this session. What do we mean by diversity and inclusion in the legal profession? Firstly, I need to say that I will be talking from the perspective of the England and Wales jurisdiction and I will give you a background as to how we organize ourselves here in the practice of law. The legal profession is divided into various groupings. The three prominent groupings are the barristers, who are mostly advocates, the solicitors, who are both advocates and solicitors who mainly work in offices in the high street and various other places, in local authority, in government, in international practice. We also have a group that are legal executives. And this group come up through the practical training they get in legal offices, normally around one area of law. I'm a solicitor, so I will be speaking about what we have done within my own segment of the legal profession with regard to diversity and inclusion. The Law Society of England and Wales has about 200,000 solicitors who have active practicing certificates. These certificates are renewed on an annual basis, and solicitors in England and Wales must also carry insurance. Insurance can be provided either through your firm, if you are employed in a firm, or each solicitor can make arrangements for their own insurance. Now, our branch is the most diverse purely because of the numbers. I think the barristers are probably about 10,000 or thereabouts. I'm not sure about what the figure is for the legal executives. And because of the nature of our profession, solicitors are everywhere. We are on the high streets, we work internationally, we are in government. So there is a spread. And because of that, our own branch of the profession has taken the lead insofar as equality and diversity is concerned. Now, as solicitors, our professional organization, the Law Society, promotes access to justice, upholding the rule of law, influencing regulation and helping solicitors to comply with regulation, supporting international practice of law, supporting the economic value and viability of the legal profession. And we understand and know from experience that when we promote diversity and inclusion in our profession, the outcome is better for everyone. So we say that there is a business case for diversity and inclusion. Now, in England and Wales, matters concerning diversity are underpinned by law. Our law says that you cannot discriminate, and there are certain protected characteristics that are recognized. We started off with 6, and now we are up to 9. These 9 protected characteristics are race, age, sex, gender reassignment, marriage and civil partnership, disability, sexual orientation, religion, and pregnancy. In England and Wales, this is against the law. You will be prosecuted if you are found to be discriminating against, and it is proven. And the burden of proof is on the party that is alleged to be oppressing, victimizing, or causing discrimination in regard to any one of these protected characteristics. Now, what do we do at the Law Society to ensure that our profession speaks with one voice insofar as the thrust of our policy to be the best provider of legal services, not just in the nations, in the United Kingdom, but also internationally because of the United Kingdom's history of empire. There are a lot of connections to various other former colonial entities. How do we ensure that the profession continues to develop and be a modern legal professional body that influences not just what goes on in the United Kingdom, but in the world too? We have an Equality and Diversity Committee, National Equality and Diversity Committee, which I once chaired. I chaired it from 2007 to 2010. We also have local law societies. I think we have about, I'm not quite sure, maybe about 50 local law societies. For instance, I live in Birmingham. So I'm not only a member of the National Law Society, I'm also a member of the Birmingham Law Society. Recently, 2 years ago, we established an Equality and Diversity Committee of the Birmingham Law Society. The policy at the Law Society now is to encourage all other local law societies to have Equality and Diversity Committees. The Law Society also provides practice notes on diversity, what it is, and inclusion. How do you ensure that you are practicing and channeling behavior to make your organization as diverse as it ought to be, reflecting the society we live in, and thereby increasing the benefit that flows to the firm because talent is recognized irrespective of the packaging it presents itself. We do this by providing practice notes, training. For instance, the Law Society has just launched training, which is on our website. It is free to access to every solicitor who has paid their practicing certificate. It tells you what diversity is, how you can organize your firms, what the challenges are, how to overcome those challenges, and the red flags which indicate that you may not be as diverse as you ought to be. One of them being a very simple test. Look around you. Is everyone around you exactly like you? Are you all men? Are you all women? How do people who have a different sexual orientation, how do you include them in what you are doing? Race is one area where there's a lot of attention on race, purely because of the centuries of endemic systemic racism. And the fact that Black, Asian, and minority ethnic people, say like the Chinese, are easily recognizable in any society. So it's very easy. For instance, I'm a council member of the Law Society, and it is easy to spot me. So when we look around, there are 90 of us on council. When I started out about 16 years ago, I may have been the only Black council member. Right now, there are over 20 of us, Asian, Chinese, African, Caribbean, Ghanaian, Nigerian. There are quite a number of us. But what about the protected characteristics that no one can see? How are we faring? So the way we deal with it is by engagement, training, conferences, providing assistance to our membership. And the way we put it to our membership is that it is good business to be inclusive and diverse, because you tap into all the talent that is available. At the end of the day, what we are looking for is competence from a solicitor. It isn't how that solicitor presents themselves. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Mrs. Nwabueze Nwokolo. Thanks for that. Thank you. That's a good one, because actually I never knew you could be discriminated based on pregnancy. So we'll get back to doing the
Many people don't know that. Yes.
I didn't know that. That was the very first time. So thanks for that. We'll talk about that during the Q&A session. The next speaker is Professor David Weiss. Professor David Weiss is the founder and director of the Institute of Dispute Resolution and the head of the Connecting Bridges and Borders program through the New Jersey City University. Professor Weiss advances self-determination values through concepts of mediation theory and promotes innovation to advance foreign direct investment, FDI. In 2020, he was appointed on the board of the directors at International Mediation Institute, IMI, for his work in global mediation. He was also featured in the New York State Bar Association Lawyer Journal, as well as published in Cardozo Singapore Mediation Convention Journal, and his research and use of mediation. It's my pleasure to welcome Professor David Weiss. Thank you.
I first want to thank all of you and the honor to be part of this important conversation on diversity, inclusion, and its focus on both Africa, but also on the world. The Institute for Dispute Resolution was founded 7 years ago at New Jersey City University, thanks to the opportunity I was given as a professor from Dr. Sue Henderson, our president. The university is located in the most diverse city in the United States, Jersey City, which sits across from the most important capital markets currently in the world. One of the things I find interesting about what we started and built at the Institute for Dispute Resolution and its various programs and projects, including its seminal Connecting Bridges and Borders program, podcast series, Spotify systems, the upcoming digital magazine, is that it's not just one person. It involves students, it involves mentors, such as many of the distinguished speakers today from all over the world and from all different backgrounds. And it really reflects our small footprint in the world on diversity and inclusion. The word Connecting Bridges and Borders was organically created at a point in time when we were creating different programs to show how mediation can play a different perspective, innovative role in an outreach process where normally mediation was not 7 years ago, typically found in a school that did not have a law school. And it was strategically placed within the ethos of a business school. The reason or the rationale at that time was to start to open the minds of future business leaders from a very, very diverse student pool within that most, and currently still to this date, is diverse city in the United States. Many of my students come from every place in every corner of this globe. They speak more than one language. Their journeys to the United States are unique, inspiring, and those collective experiences provide an amazing opportunity when we're all in the classroom together, or we're working within our institute, or working with our strategic partners around the international community. The key here is, how do you create more inclusivity and diversity? How do you create more opportunity in connecting? It's about collaboration. It's about special magic of ingredients where we look through the prism of something that's neutral, but yet significant in its neutrality. Mediation offers an opportunity to be a spoke of a wheel with many different facets. At the IDR, we focus on global issues that mediation can play one part of that facet, but is not the only genesis as the Institute has evolved over the years. Today, I'm speaking on the foreign direct investment and cross-border business perspective. But I do want to emphasize it's not the only part of the Institute. We focus on human rights. We focus on gender inequality now. We focus on what's happening in the world and bringing it back for us to the United States, because there are a lot of challenges. These challenges are not unique in the annals of history. As human beings, as much as we evolved, we have not evolved. We have within us a subconsciousness that can be easily unleashed into barbarism. Our conscience tells us otherwise. Mediation is one part of a puzzle of keeping barbarism at bay. As we see today, during this unique, but really a wake-up call moment in life that all of us are facing around the world with COVID, we still see genocide. It's happening right now in Ethiopia. We still see totalitarian regimes like Bobby Wine under house arrest in Uganda. We see the young fighting for opportunity with amazing human talents in Nigeria. We can look to Europe and the anti-Semitism again on the rise in France, in Germany. Mediation is about coming together. We're not always going to agree. Even within our families, those that we love, we can't always agree. But we can find a common ethos of listening to each other, of finding some methodology to raise awareness and keep barbarism where it should have been back at the beginning of the creation of mankind. Foreign direct investment is a fancy word for really coming together economically to share the resources of this planet. It's an opportunity, if used properly, and in past it hasn't always been used properly, to share ideas, to create opportunities for advancement, to make this a better world. If the last 100 years hasn't told us anything during the Industrial Revolution, we are destroying our planet. We are consuming too much. Our economic policies are incorrect. We need to revisit. Mediation is a support tool to how we can look toward a better and more improved economic opportunity of collaboration between nation states and within the world itself. We have started on that road. There are some shades of light. One of the most important currently is a term that perhaps some of you know called ESG. It stands for Environment, Social, and Corporate Governance. By 2025, according to the Bloomberg sustainability measurements, $73 trillion will be in the hands of ESG mandates. Now, what does this mean? It means that there are going to be requirements, and they've already started. And there are many institutions around the world. In the United States, you can see it in entities such as HSBC, setting up its own ESG departments. You can see it in Citibank. You'll see it in Goldman Sachs. It's private equity funds. It's funds that originate from pensions like Cal State or CalPERS, which is the largest pension fund system in the United States. And it's a way to require capital, to require platforms to correct, rebalance, and start anew again. That comes from changing the board of directors to create this diversity and inclusion. It comes from how we do our foreign direct investment and what accountability we have in that process. It comes in the form of what are we creating and what are we innovating. ESG is a pedestal that, when combined with mediation, can transform foreign direct investment and innovate it into a new way of thinking about how the world should operate when it comes to economic trade and raising the standards of living for all, not just a few. It's also a way to share and collaborate, to create diversity and inclusion. Africa is a powerhouse. It's always been a powerhouse. But today, more than ever, it is ready to unleash itself around the world, but not be dictated by others. Not by China, not by the United States, not by Europe. Foreign direct investment should itself be organically grown from Africa out to the world. Mediation can play a part in that process because as investments take place, there'll be conflicts, there'll be miscalculations. And it's a way to allow and facilitate the process organically from Africa out to the world, from the world to Africa, to engage in a different way of looking at idea creation, business, transfer of knowledge. The Singapore Convention on Mediation is the beginning of a tool within the prism of mediation. But the question is, what are we going to do with the tool? Are we going to allow just it to be used by large companies to make their investments into foreign direct investment? Or are we going to expand the tool to allow SME companies and startups and individuals that are in micro creation mode? The charge is for our academic institutions like the IDR to partner around the world together as a new highway to support the Singapore Mediation Convention, to create a new way of looking at foreign direct investment, a new way for diversity and inclusion. But that charge is with not only the professors and those in academics. What's most important is it begins with the youth. It begins with the new generation. It's your torch to carry. Are you willing to have the responsibility to carry that torch? Make a difference. Consume less. What you create, make it worth something that you can certainly make money from, but at the same time, if you're going to be in free market enterprise, make sure that there's a fair and balanced approach to the process. Corporate social responsibility, another simple word, but it's just a word if you don't define the box in terms of what you do with it. So it's another charge for our business, future generation leaders to think about. If you're going to create, what are you not just doing in carbon footprint reduction? What are you doing in your backyard as you're creating? Who's involved in the creation? What's happening in that collaboration? Mediation plays a role inside your internal protocols. It should be right there as you're writing your human resource protocols. Mediation is a sustainability method. It's a method of reducing the ability for conflicts to take hold. It's a way for collaboration to find a way from the conflict that may have arisen, whether it's inside the company, whether it's outside the company. This is important. It's more important than just because we're saying so. It's important because at the end, mediation is self-determination. It's like art. Art is the most powerful medium in the world. It's been used for good. It's built civilizations. It has transformed culture, created unbelievable opportunities that through that has come engineering, architectural opportunities, healthcare. The list can go on. But at the same time, in the wrong hands, it can become a negative. It can lead again towards the barbarisms. Mediation is that art too. So my concluding remarks is more of a take charge, embrace mediation, embrace conflict resolution within the business mediums, because it will increase the opportunities for all and create an inclusive and diversity environment that more than ever we must embrace, or we will go backwards. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much for that. I like what you said, embrace mediation as a form of conflict resolution. I totally agree and I support that. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you. The next speaker is Dr. Katherine Simpson. Dr. Katherine Simpson is an arbitrator based in Michigan. She is the founder of Simpson Dispute Resolution and is also works at London 33 Bedford Road Chamber. It focuses her practice on the resolution of complex cross-border commercial and investment disputes. Dr. Katherine Simpson began her practice as a tribunal secretary to leading arbitrators in the international dispute resolution field. She has been involved in notable cases, which includes over 30 international commercial and investment arbitration, chaired by Professor Karl Heinz Buchschigel, William W. Park, amongst others. She lectures frequently on topics related to international dispute resolution, and her pro bono work related to diversity and inclusion have been cited by leading authorities globally. It's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Katherine Simpson.
Hello, and thank you for having me. It is an honor to be here. So what I'm going to be talking about is how do we find these diverse neutrals or diverse arbitrators? And maybe a little bit of why is this even such a difficult question? It really doesn't have to be. To take it really to the beginning, My start in this began in January 2020 when I learned that the European Union and Canada, in their Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, had filled their arbitrator panels, 6 arbitrators for Canada, 3 men, 3 women, 5 arbitrators for the European Union, 4 men, 1 woman, and 5 arbitrators on the chairman's roster, all of whom were male. And having worked in international dispute resolution and studied it like many who are perhaps watching this webinar, it really hit me in the gut, because I thought, here are 2 entities that have spent millions of dollars on promoting gender equality. If they can't even find women to fill out this treaty roster, maybe there aren't any. It's that it was a shocking and it was a scary example. So I decided maybe I could find some arbitrators who would be equally qualified to be on that list. And as I was getting to start, I of course reached out to some colleagues, but several were discouraging. And it was actually this discouragement that prompted, that really pushed part of it forward. When finally one friend said, "Look, Katie, you are never going to find a woman who's got 20 years of experience on the World Bank appellate body and has an additional 20 years of experience as a judge in their home country. You're not going to find 15 women who fit this profile, and you're going to look like a fool." And in a way, he was right. I would not and did not find 15 women with that profile. But that was okay, because neither did Canada and neither did the European Union. It was an absurdly high standard. So I went about studying who was actually appointed to the CETA list, and then presented the European Union and Canada with a roster of 70 women who were each skills matches to another person who had been appointed to that list. A few weeks later, met with Nancy Thevenin, and we thought, what if we could do the same with African Americans? Because at the time in the US, and this is before George Floyd, at the time, people would still excuse a failure to appoint African Americans by saying, well, we really just couldn't find any. So at the end of January 2020, now just over a year ago, we set out to make what became the new list, Arbitrators of African Descent. It took several months, but finally pulled together 123 potential arbitrator appointees. They provided their CVs and websites, and finally different institutions started even using this list to increase the diversity on their own rosters. With the Canada roster, with the CETA list roster, as well as with the Arbitrators of African Descent roster, Nancy and I, well, we proved that it is actually as easily said as it is done. There are plenty of people in this exciting market who are equally qualified for positions and for the role of arbitrator. So how did we go about this? First, recognizing that this is actually research, and each person that's a part of it has their own internal biases. Sorry, I'm going to just stutter for a moment. Where do we look? Where do we begin? Of course, we started with organizations. And what I found was that when typing an organization's name, I was often able to find maybe the executive level of an organization, but wasn't really able to access the membership. So we began by Googling arbitrators, going state by state, reaching out to friends for recommendations, connecting with people, and really letting everything sort of expand out with friends referring friends. And that was how the Arbitrators of African Descent roster came about. Now, what I've learned from this is that using neutral terms is what really got us to the arbitrators that we were looking for. As said, researching something like Black arbitrators or women in international trade took us straight to an organization. But in addition to looking at conferences, we looked at publications, we went to people's LinkedIn pages, and we tried to do our research using as neutral of terms as we could. But then, in preparing these lists, there's also a part of the researcher, because we've each got our own internal biases to battle. For me, personally, I've never worked at a place where there were any female secretaries. So one could imagine that if one was really in a hurry and trying to just quickly find a female arbitrator, or sorry, if one was really in a hurry and just trying to find an arbitrator, one might skim past the female names. Just skip by them. The female might as well just be the secretary. And so to prevent myself from doing that, I wrote down the name of every single person I came across and researched that person until I could determine whether this was a person who I should reach out to and see if they're interested in being on this list, or if this was a person who was just part of a different field. It was a wonderful way for me to learn how to appreciate different search results. Another tactic was to change up the language. Researching in English, for example, you're probably going to find a lot of English-speaking people, but you might overlook the equally relevant French-speaking results. Try looking into the French conferences, the French publications, and others. And then as you're going along, or as I was going along with the CETA list, my goal was to have a roster that was not only female, where each woman could be matched up with somebody else who was on the panel. I also wanted this roster to reflect the population of the United States demographically. As far as women were concerned, I confess there were no men on this women's list, but to have the people on this roster reflect the demographics of the United States at a minimum, which meant that if the United States population is 10%, then let me rephrase this, I apologize. My goal was to ensure that the roster would reflect, at a minimum, the demographics of Canada and the European Union, because those were the two entities in this treaty. This meant that if 10% of the populations of both Canada and the European Union was of African descent, then at a minimum, my list should have at least 10% of the people being of African descent. And if in my search it didn't come out that way, that I would understand that as a signal to myself that there was something wrong with the entire research, because it would indicate not only it would indicate, for starters, that an unintended variable would have crept in: race. in a way that I had not intended it to be used. And if something like that is going to be able to fall into a research problem, then what else could I be ignoring over here? Maybe if I looked a little bit deeper in the list, I'd see that, oh my gosh, everybody's actually with the same organization. Maybe they all graduated from the same associateship at the same law firms. Maybe they're all part of the same organizations. There would be some sort of flaw in the research. And in short, too late to make a long story short, I researched and wrote and called until that demographic element was met for the CETA roster. With the Arbitrators of African Descent roster, of course, this was a roster for only people of African descent who had a connection to the United States and were interested in international dispute resolution. How people can use this roster now, you can actually use it to check your research just in the same way that I've described. When you're searching for an arbitrator using all of your neutral search terms, if you go through your results and find that you have not identified a suitable candidate of African descent, go ahead and reach for my list. Look down you will see you will find at least 7 women who have extensive experience in international construction arbitration. You will find people who have experience in investor-state dispute resolution, in multi-billion-dollar dispute resolution, oil and gas, and even low-value cases, labor, mediators, you'll find everyone. And as you're reading through the list, searching it just like you do a regular PDF, you can reflect and say, why didn't I find this person? One way that I think there's one block that I think people do come up when doing this list. People sometimes skim past names that are perhaps too female, or they skim past a name that they don't think that they can pronounce. But they also skim past profiles that do not feature pictures. And in the United States, keeping a photograph on your website can, some understand that as inviting the same kind of discrimination that people are trying to fight against. So in your searches, do not exclude the people who refuse to put a picture on their website. A photograph can only tell you inadmissible information about a candidate for an arbitration. It can only tell you a guess at a person's age, a guess at their gender, a guess at their ethnicity, maybe part of their socioeconomic background. All elements that should be excluded from somebody's decision making when choosing an arbitrator. So with that, when finding diverse arbitrators, I trust that there are tools that can be used to assist you, and I can report that the CPR has even used this list to recruit new neutrals. So with that, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Katherine. Thanks for the presentation, and thanks for the list again. Thank you for the new list. Quite commendable. Thank you. The next speaker is Professor Benjamin Davies, retired. He's a tenured professor of law of Harvard College, Harvard Law School, and Harvard Business School, where he was article editor of the Harvard International Law Journal. He's the former chair of the ABA, the American Bar Association section of dispute resolution, and a former member of the ABA Standing Committee on Law and National Security. He's a contributing editor at Jurist. He's published dozens of articles on topics related to international and domestic arbitration, online dispute resolution, and offline dispute resolution, as well as international law. His topic is international commercial arbitration Role in Diversity. It's my pleasure to welcome Professor Benjamin Davies.
Thank you very much, Ijeoma, for allowing me to be with you today. I've really been looking forward to this panel. So, first of all, I'm going from the work I did with the ABA, that the ABA in the legal profession looked at 4 groups, American Bar Association, which were underrepresented in the profession: women, minorities, lawyers with disabilities, and LGBTQ lawyers. And that is the bandwidth, so to speak, of how they've thought about underrepresented groups. I take the point that Nwabueze put forward about the expansion out to 9 categories as opposed to those categories as a further example of different visions of what diversity means in the world. And also, I take it also because it struck me as I was listening that there are sometimes in the United States people say, "Oh, I'm colorblind. I don't see race." And so I was thinking, maybe I should start saying, "I don't see gender." I don't see gender. Oh, my wife is a woman. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh. See, I don't see race. I don't see gender. You know what I mean? It was really, I was like, come on, man. Really. But just because we see these things, I think, that does not mean that, somehow what I'm trying to say, I guess what I'm trying to say is that, yes, we are diverse. Obviously, we are all human, but we are all diverse, and we have different aspects of who we are. We have all kinds of different aspects of who we are that relate to our cultural histories, our national histories, how we grew up, all kinds of things that are part of us. That is, I think, the richness of all of us as humans. And one of the things that I always loved about international arbitration is that I thought that the best arbitrators were the ones who were capable of what I would call cultural gymnastics. They recognized that they were French, they recognized that they were German, or they recognized they were American, but in interacting with, usually as neutrals between people of different other cultures, they sort of had an openness to the culture of those different places and what was going on. I remember once an Italian arbitrator who said to me that when he got appointed in a case, and say he was appointed in a case with an Egyptian party, right? First thing he would do is try to find what is the greatest literature of Egypt to get a sense, if I was appointed in a case, say, with Nigeria, I would have probably, I don't know, maybe you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but, I would have read Wole Soyinka, okay? Or
Chinua
Achebe, yeah, and that would give me something that would help me. Like if I was appointed in a case with Italy, there's a book by Lampedusa called Il Gatto Pardo, the leopard. Yeah. Huge book. Or in the United States, maybe Mark Twain or Huckleberry Finn as sort of really something deep in our culture, or William Faulkner. Those. I'm not sure in England, but I know in Ireland it'd be James Joyce. But as a way into these kind of amazing varieties that are there is what I'm trying to say. And that capacity for cultural gymnastics, I don't know how it gets trained into people. I think part of it can come from living in diverse environments. Certainly people who are geographically mobile are confronted with having to deal with people of different cultures. It could be, not geographically mobile within a country, but also, of course, borders is one aspect of that. Certainly, if you're living in a diverse community where you have lots of different types of people in your community, even if they're all Americans, but they're all different kinds of Americans, that certainly is part of beginning to develop that kind of cultural diversity. at the same time, whatever the culture we're in, you know, we're doing this right after the insurrection at the U.S. Capitol, okay, that everyone in the world saw. And so many people, some people are comparing it to 9/11 for the United States. We call it 1/6 now. And the point that you saw there was an outrageous expression of American white terrorism in our U.S. Capitol, where the executive branch is attacking essentially the legislature, right? One of the things that I saw last night that really struck me was a white Democratic congressman said that maybe he could fake being a Republican so that they wouldn't go after him if they caught him. And then he looked at his comrades of color and realized they had no place to hide because they would be seen as Democrats because they are Black or brown or Asian or American and all that. And it was in his head, it dawned on him, what a privilege I'm giving that I could hide. I could have anonymity, but they could not. And it was like a revelation for him. The other thing is that, I don't know if you saw yesterday, but there's this congresswoman named Marjorie Taylor Greene, who the House voted to strip her of her committees, which is one party stripping someone from the other party of their committee assignments because of the violent things that she had said. Well, yesterday I saw that there was a video that she did with someone that I think Ms. Nwabueze may know, Katie Hopkins in England.
Yeah.
Where in that video, Ijeoma, you may have seen this too, where Katie Hopkins is I don't know how you describe it. She's like a pretty, well, right wing, it seems to me. I'm not an English expert, but really right wing, xenophobic, all that kind of stuff in England. Is that fair enough? Racist, all those fine words go to cover. Okay. So the two of them are together doing this interview, and it's the day after the insurrection at our U.S. Capitol. Okay. And Marjorie Taylor Greene says, I would do it again. This is after we've had people die. And she says to Katie Hopkins, who's really praising her, like, oh, we need to have more white people like you in the United States. So we're in 2021, and I'm saying this is reality, okay? Yeah. Now, as an American, I've been going, you know, I'm 65. I was integrating spaces since I was about 6 years old, right? So this, you know, this is in the environment, but it's less than it used to be, but it's not as good as it ought to be, okay? And there are certain things that go on that have changed, but you'll always know that this is something in the background that you'll have to deal with. The thing is that I think is so important is to not let oneself be limited by the limitations of these others about what you can do. If you don't let yourself be convinced of your inferiority, and you realize that their trip of inferiority is in their heads, not in yours, it can help a lot, because you find a lot of things to be very, very bizarre about the way these people who are reacting to you treat you. And on occasion, you have amazing things happen. I think this is interesting. I understand that Coca-Cola has just said that, okay, we want diversity in the law firms that represent us. And if we don't get it, we're going to cut our bill. We're going to cut your fees by 30%. We don't want pledges. We don't want promises. We want results. And that kind of emphasis that can happen can help to change things. Just like the list that Katie works on says, okay, you say you can't find people, here's 130. You say you can't find women between Canada to be chairs between Canada and Europe. Okay, here's 6, here's 50, here's 150. Stop the nonsense and get on with making the changes that are needed. So after maybe I should end with this, which is, you know, I have been a beneficiary of what I would call gender discrimination. Okay. And I will be honest about this, because when I first applied for a job at the ICC in Paris, I got the job. And at the time, there were only men who were legal counsels. And I think there was an attitude that, well, could a woman be a legal counsel? This is 1986. Would she have the authority? Would a person from the Middle East respect her? You know, all this kind of stuff. I remember conversations like this. So that must have meant there were 1,000 resumes there. There may have been 500 women who applied, but there was this kind of thing, well, let's kind of pick a guy. And I ended up being one of the guys who got picked at that time. Now, over time, these things changed. And I think we've now got the president of the ICC court is a woman. That would have been inconceivable maybe 30 years ago, right? And I know that there are a number of women who are legal counsels or in various roles within the hierarchy at the ICC. But the point I'm just trying to make is that whatever are these limits that are in other people's heads, it's very important not to have those limits be in your head. And also to understand, and I'll finish with this, that in the 38 or so years I worked in international commercial arbitration, there was never a problem of not having enough qualified Africans or African Americans or Afro-Europeans. I always knew people who were remarkably qualified coming from the Africa and the African diaspora. The issue was whether they were getting the appointments or the cases or being hired or all that. But it was never an issue of people with the skill sets needed. Afro-English, whatever. Now, yes, the numbers might be minuscule, but the numbers are minuscule in this arena of international dispute resolution. Anyway, but I guarantee you, I met many people along the way, tremendously competent people, but they weren't given the chance. On the other hand, there were people along the way, you know, it's the old distinction between gatekeepers and gate openers. Are people being gatekeepers or are they being gate openers? It's the fundamental question for every institution, for every law firm, when it terms about allowing people, sorry, again, I get excited, excuse me, but allowing people the opportunity to see what they can do. I knew nothing about international arbitration. I applied for a job in law school with a law firm in Paris. Somebody there, a guy named Eric Schwartz, who some of you may know from being Secretary General of the ICC court and all that, he saw something in me and gave me a shot. This white guy gave me a shot to come to Paris for summer. And then when I got to Paris that summer, all of a sudden I was exposed to our international arbitration, something I had no clue about. But somebody said, let's show him a little bit of this. And, you know, and from that, a passion developed. So what I'm trying to say is that a lot of times we sort of have in our head these ways of thinking. Sometimes you hear it called implicit bias or explicit bias or all that kind of stuff. I like to describe it in the sort of computer sense as algorithms. We have these little algorithms in our head about people. We see somebody like that and there's like a thing that goes through our head. Okay? And so you're going to work at some place or something like that, and everybody's got their algorithm about you because they've looked at certain characteristics and they concluded certain things about you, right? So what I look for is people with the ability to do the cultural gymnastics, or what I like to call it, who confuse the algorithms, who look at this person like me and said, come and work with us in this little thing in arbitration to see if you would like it. And maybe the others around him are saying, what are you putting that guy in there for? What could he possibly know? And you go in there and all of a sudden you find a passion about something that you never even knew about. And that those kinds of splitting things up or shaking things up a little, and that ability to confuse the algorithms, to remember to hire the first woman as a counsel. That's one thing that Eric Schwartz did when he was there at the ICC. He named the first woman counsel, was a French woman. It confused the algorithms about what that role could be. You see what I'm saying? And those kinds of confusions, I think, are something that we as humans can do to help we keep moving these things forward. That there is resistance, absolutely. We saw that in the insurrection that we saw at the Capitol. Everyone else has seen various versions of this in the U.S. Capitol, that we've seen various versions of this in their own settings. Yet at the same time, I'm always brought back to this quote from a book by Hans Fallada named Every Man Dies Alone, about this working class couple in Germany who rebelled against Hitler in 1942 in Berlin. And the line in the book is, the main thing is you fight back. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Benjamin. Thanks a lot. Thanks for the presentation. I have lots of questions for you, but I'll be doing the Q&A session.
Happy to.
The next speaker is Ms. Nwa'ndo Ume-Nwagbo. She's admitted to practice in Georgia and North Carolina. She's a co-founder of Smithers and Ume-Nwagbo LLC. She focuses her practice on representing companies in all aspects of employment and employee benefits law. She regularly counsels clients regarding their obligations under federal tax and employee benefits laws, as well as other laws that govern their employee benefit plans and programs such as qualified retirement plans, employee stock ownership plans, and executive compensation plans, as well as programs. Nwa'ndo Ume-Nwagbo will be speaking about how do you pronounce your name again? Her topic, how do you pronounce your name again? It's my pleasure to welcome Ms. Nwa'ndo Ume-Nwagbo.
Thank you very much to the American Society of International Law. Thank you specifically to the African Interest Group. Thank you very much for the co-panelists who are here today. Yes, the name of my speech, or whatever you want to call it, is how do you pronounce your name again? Because that is a question that I have received pretty much my entire life. My name is Nwa'ndo Ume-Nwagbo. I was born in Camden, New Jersey. I lived in Nigeria for 16 years, and I now live in Atlanta, Georgia. I have voted in every presidential election since 1996, and I am a citizen of the United States. But depending on who I'm talking to, some or all of these statements have been used to judge me and to question whether or not I have the right to call myself a lawyer, whether I have the right to vote in any election, or whether I even have the right to call myself an American. I'm not a social scientist, I am not a professor, and I don't presume to have the ability or even the desire to address racism in the law. But what I do have is 23 years of dealing with the legal system in the United States of America. First as a law school applicant, next as a law student, and now for the last almost 20 years as a lawyer. And in looking back through my experiences as a Black woman, as an American, as an African, as a Nigerian American female lawyer, I have come to realize that at a fundamental level, we as a society now need to acknowledge a simple and yet radical fact. Until we begin to see and treat each other as human beings, we will continue to run around this idea of what are we going to do about racism until we are blue in the face. What we need to do is to finally learn how to pronounce people's names properly. Not what we think they should be called, not what we believe they should be called, but what the people's names actually are. Let's go back to the beginning of this speech. My name is Nwa'ndo Ume-Nwagbo, 22 letters of the English alphabet, the order of which could result in any combination of words that mean nothing. But in attempts to pronounce my name, it has resulted in misspellings, mispronunciations, and other malicious and demeaning names. A lot of times people are just plain rude, plain ignorant, and plain arrogant. They think the person whose name is being mispronounced is not worthy of the respect that you would give a dog. They think it is simply no big deal if a name is pronounced. They think it's funny when the name is mispronounced because who would choose to be called that? Well, it is a big deal and it is not funny. Mispronouncing a person's name is far more than just, oops, I misspoke. Recently, former Senator David Perdue of Georgia decided that he would have some fun in mispronouncing Vice President Kamala Harris's name. He said, Kamala, Kamala, Kamala Mala, I don't know, whatever. After 4 years of serving in the United States Senate along with Vice President Harris, Senator Perdue could not even be bothered to learn how to properly pronounce his co-senator's name. He chose instead to make fun of her because of her non-English name. When confronted by the press, his spokesperson said, oh, he didn't mean anything by it. He just mispronounced the name. Another example, recently, the CEOs of a number of technology companies were summoned to appear before the United States House of Representatives. The CEO of Alphabet Inc., Mr. Sundar Pichai, was to testify before the House, and he was referred to as Mr. Pichai. Mr. Pichai. Now, Vice President Harris and Mr. Pichai are successful and influential people and will continue to be so. I'm not so concerned about them, but I am far more concerned and worried about the young men and women who are contemplating their next move in life and make the rather unfortunate choice of law school being that next step. For instance, I'm thinking of the young law student applicant who is attending her first law school reception in honor of law school applicants just like her. She walks in and gives her name to the person at the welcome desk. And she's handed a name tag with something scribbled that's supposed to be her name. It is not her name. She doesn't understand and she's dumbfounded. I'm concerned about the young lawyer who has just graduated from law school and is starting his first day at the big law firm of me and you, whatever names you want to put there. As he is presented to the associates and partners at his new law firm, his new team leader introduces him as Bubba, since the partner could not be bothered to learn the correct pronunciation of his name. He's beyond shocked. And like I said earlier, that was me. I was an associate who was introduced to the entire law firm as Bubba. I am concerned and worried about the young people who will be welcomed into the hallowed halls of the law and who will face the same discrimination and same racism that I faced and continue to face. Pronouncing a person's name is a mark and a show of respect. It's an acknowledgement of that person's existence as a human being. When we choose to mispronounce a person's name because it's too difficult, or choose to call someone by a nickname because we conveniently have given them a nickname that they don't even choose to be called, we essentially are choosing to erase that person's existence as a human being. It is disrespectful at the most basic and fundamental level. Now, people from Africa and Asia and Central and South America are not the only ones with difficult names. For instance, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Mike Krzyzewski, Timothy Chalamet are all incredibly difficult names, and yet we somehow have mastered how to say each and every one of those names. If these actors expect their names to be pronounced correctly every time, then I am certain that Hassan Minhaj, for instance, or Uzo Aduba deserve the same respect. And bringing it closer to home, Ijeoma Ononogbu deserves to have her name pronounced correctly every time. Mrs. Nwabueze Nwokolo deserves to be called by her full name every time. And yes, Nwa'ndo Ume-Nwagbo deserves to be called by her full name. It is the very least that we deserve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nwa'ndo. Thank you for that. Thanks for that. Thank you so much. At this point, conclude this conversation, but I need your closing remarks from the keynote speaker, everyone. What are your closing remarks with regards to diversity in the legal profession? Mrs. Nwabueze Nwokolo, please.
Insofar as the England and Wales jurisdiction is concerned, and in particular reference to the solicitor's branch, it's a work in progress. We monitor, we teach, we educate, we bring in all the strands of our profession, And what we underpin all our activity upon is the fact that diversity is good for business. You need to speak to your audience in the language that they can understand. And law firms are all about billable hours, profit, and they want to use the best practices in order to have robust, because we call it the business of law. Law is a business, and we want to be the best we can possibly be. And the practice of law in the United Kingdom is an international endeavor. So we are our solicitors are our ambassadors that we send out into the world. So it is in our interest to have a diverse and inclusive society of lawyers. So it's a work in progress. And we're doing a lot. I know I've said it so many times. The solicitor's profession is doing so much better than the other legal members of the legal profession in England and Wales.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mrs. Nwabueze Nwokolo. Your closing remarks, Professor Ben Davies, please, 5 seconds. We need to conclude. Thank you. 5 seconds, please.
So 5 seconds is it's not as good as it ought to be, but it's better than it was.
Okay.
And so we have to keep those things in mind, and that the way that it keeps opening up is to do what the National Council of Negro Women's Clubs had as a motto, which I believe was lift as we rise.
Okay.
So as we all lift, go wherever we go up, we as we rise, let us lift those who are earlier in their careers, helping them see how they can get to where they can go, even imagining the careers.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Thank you. Dr. Katherine Simpson, please, your closing remarks.
Thank you. If anybody ever needs proof that diversity is good for business, great for business, excellent, just look at the career of Professor Ben Davis and ask yourself, where would international arbitration be if Professor Ben Davis had not invented international fast-track commercial arbitration? Now, there's no excuse for a lack of diversity in a legal team or on an arbitral tribunal, in a judge's chambers. There's no excuse. People are findable, and really at the end of the day, diversity is a choice. It is an active choice that everybody needs to make, and at the same time, a lack of diversity is also an intentional choice. It's wonderful that we're finally in an age where companies are putting their money where their mouth is on diversity commitments and saying, no, we're not satisfied with promises. We've been celebrating good intentions for far too long. It is time to begin rewarding that active choice to do what we've said we're going to do, what we've said is going to be profitable, and what we've said is morally and legally right. We're going to be diverse. We're not going to discriminate against people on the basis of immutable characteristics that have nothing to do with the task at hand. So I'm glad to be alive in this age.
Yeah, same here. Thank you very much, Dr. Katherine Simpson. Thank you so much. On this note, we come to the end of this webinar. We've all enjoyed it. A very big thank you to Michael, who's been so supportive and been the technical guy. Thank you, Michael. Thank you very much. Thank you. Everybody, to our keynote speaker, thank you so much, Mrs. Nwabueze Nwokolo. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. Thank you. To Professor Ben Davies. Thank you so much for making our time, giving your retirement. Thank you so much. It means a lot to me. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And Dr. Katherine Simpson, thank you. Keep doing what you're doing. Thank you so much. So everybody,
thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.